Hi, everyone. Welcome. People advance. So we wanted to welcome everyone here today to learn more about the Living Cultures Grant. Also, a chance to learn about who we are. ACTA is how we're often referred to. ACTA is the Alliance for California Traditional Arts. And we were established in 1997 as a nonprofit by an alliance of arts practitioners from different cultures, backgrounds, arts activists, and folklorists. And we still strive to be a wide array of folklorists, arts practitioners, justice warriors in many different fields of art and culture here on our staff today. ACTA promotes and supports ways for cultural traditions to thrive now and in the future. We strive to provide advocacy, resources, such as funding opportunities, and also networking connection for all California traditional artists and serving their communities. Let's see. I wanted to say a little bit. I kind of jumped right in because we were a little late start, but my name again is Aliyah Najmawadi, and I believe we are doing some descriptions of who we are as another way to be just in our advocacy. And I'm zooming in from the Bay Area, from the Chochenyo speaking Ohlone people. And I'm a program manager for ACTA, and I manage the apprenticeship program. A little bit about who I am. I have long brown hair and brown eyes, and I'm wearing a gray sweater and a pink shirt for a descriptor. A little bit more about what ACTA believes traditional arts to be. These are some common themes that we have found over the years that unite what traditional arts are for ACTA. ACTA thinks of traditional arts in the sense of that they are grounded in a common heritage. They often share languages, religion, or an occupation, or from a region. Traditional arts are often based in a collective wisdom of a people and carry shared aesthetics of those communities. And most importantly, these are art forms that affirm the culture of the community that they are stemming from. Like I said, I'm a program manager for the apprenticeship program. The program has closed for this year. We'll be reopening in the spring. The apprenticeship program is for transmission-based study. This is a one-on-one intensive training between a mentor artist and an apprentice. The mentor artist, it's a contract, it is not a grant, and the mentor artist is offered $5,000 to offer these one-on-one trainings in a specific traditional art form to an eligible California-based apprentice. These programs run from 6 months over to 1 year. The minimum is 6 months. The next cycle again will be in the spring, so I look forward to talking with more of you when the time gets closer. And with that, I can pass you back over to Betty, if you're ready to start the Living Cultures Grant presentation.
Gracias, Aliyah, y gracias también por
Thank you, Aliyah. Thank you for reminding me that I should also describe myself and who I am, because I also did not introduce myself. I'm Betty Marin, and I'm the Associate Director of Programming for ACTA. Right now, I have long hair, curly, and dark hair. I have glasses, and I am also wearing a yellow shirt. So the focus of our session today, and I'll be going back and forth between English and Spanish, We are here to talk about the Living Cultures grant. And the first image that we have here is an incredible collective called Crudas Cubensi, and they dedicate themselves to Cuban music and poetry. And they got the grant last year in order to put on this festival, Cubaya Festival in Berkeley, in the Bay Area. So I'm going to be using images from different people and groups who have received the grant. So these are going to serve as examples of who is eligible for the grant and what types of projects can be used with the grant. Let's go to the next slide.
Next slide, please. Gracias. Entonces, la beca también es posible por el
So the grant is made possible by the support that ACTA receives from other organizations and agencies. And our main financier is the California Arts Council and state agencies. Sorry, California Arts Council, which is a state agency. And we also have additional support from William and Flora Hewlett Foundation and the Walter and Elise Haas Fund. So we'd like to thank them for supporting this grant and for supporting the incredible work that you do.
I see a comment how in the chat, and so there's an option to listen in to English. There's interpretation between both languages, and I'm going to put a little message in the chat so that you have information on how to access the interpretation. And you can also ask for help in the chat, and Jennifer Jameson will help you. Okay. Next slide. Entonces, la beca está abierta ahorita.
So the grant is open right now. This year, the amount for individual applicants will be 7,500, and for organizations, it's 10,000. You have about 2 months to do the application. The deadline is July 31st, and we'll let you know around the end of October. And the grant is for activities between November 1st of this year and the 31st of October of next year. And here on the right hand, you can see an artist who does African-American quilting, Marsha Carter. And she was participating in workshops by Patricia Montgomery, who received the Living Cultures grant in 2023. Next slide.
Okay.
So we're also going to speak about who's eligible for the grant. So for individual artists, they're artists who need to live in California, and you need to be rooted in a tradition that you have been practicing during at least 5 years. You need to be 18 years or older. And also you need to be able to receive California taxable income. So the grant goes directly to the artist. So you will be taxed, have federal taxes on it. So here, our photo is of Benita Martinez, who is a Oaxacan artist and who does traditional weaving of her people in Oaxaca. Next slide. So for organizations, we're going to focus on organizations who have the average income from the past 3 years of less than 500,000. They also need to be a nonprofit with 501c3 status, and community groups without nonprofit status can also apply through a California-based fiscal sponsor. And in the center, we have 2 artists who do weaving work in the Hmong tradition. Next slide. So for tribal nations can apply through their cultural programs, and they can apply through their status as a tribal nation or also through a fiscal sponsor. Next slide. So I am seeing questions in the chat related to the slides. So I'm going to quickly mention the 500,000 is an average of the last 3 years. So it would be the average over the last 3 years. To determine that, you need to look at the income from each year and then divide that by 3 to get the average. And we can look at that a little bit more in detail. So I wanted to quickly answer that.
Can we go back to the tribal nation slide, Aaliyah, please? If we could go back to the tribal nation slide, please, the one before. Yes, thank you. So for tribal nations, the $500 revenue is applicable to their cultural program or to their cultural department. So not to the tribe as a whole. Just want to clarify that. And as I mentioned earlier, just to clarify, they can apply directly through if they're a federally recognized tribe, through that status, or if not, through a fiscal sponsor. So I'm trying to catch questions, but we're also going to keep track of those and come back to them at the end. So yeah, we will be responding to your questions. Okay, so if we could go back to, okay, thank you. Entonces, ¿qué es un patrocinador fiscal?
So what is a fiscal sponsor for folks who have not worked with fiscal sponsors? They are nonprofit organizations that they take the money on behalf of the organization that's applying, and generally they do it for an admin fee. So the sponsor is responsible of reporting the income to the IRS, and the organization who is applying needs to be in a communication with the sponsor and coming to an agreement of how the funds are going to be used. So, you know, there has to be more administration and control potentially from the fiscal sponsor, or less, depending on your agreement. So it's very important to find a sponsor that is strongly aligned with the mission and the values of the organization, so you can come to an agreement and you are able to manage the funds. And in the case of the fiscal sponsor, that organization, their budget can be higher than 500,000. It does not have an impact on the eligibility for the grant. So if the fiscal sponsor wants to apply directly as an organization, then there are a budget limitations on the yearly budget. And if we can go to the next slide, please. So what do we fund?
So I'm going to go ahead and switch to English. So, you know, the main goals of the grant are around nurturing cultural continuity through the learning and practice of traditional arts, sustaining cultural practices with needed purchases and services, and also being able to engage your communities and others through public programs. Those are kind of the three main areas. We could go to the next slide. Okay. So, you know, some examples of what that could look like when we're talking about, you know, education and transmission. That could be through workshops, through gatherings, intergenerational classes, or other educational programs. The photo that you see on this slide is actually educational tours organized by Keisha Woods Chan, who's also a recent grantee. You know, doing cultural tours in Oakland that are focusing on the political and social and cultural history of that area. Also, another example might be around endangered language conservation. And this we asked you to carry out within the context of a traditional art form. For instance, language learning through, you know, cooking classes or dancing classes or some other traditional art form. I think we've had a few projects with language learning in the context of traditional foods. And then other examples, you know, might be related to materials and supplies. And in this case, we have to also follow the requirements of our funders. And they define materials and supplies as things that can be expended within the grant activity period. So not necessarily like equipment that, you know, will last a lifetime or something like that. And if you have questions about any of these, you can certainly put them in the chat, and also I'm available to kind of talk about your specific needs and the work that you're trying to accomplish with the grant. Next slide, please. Other examples, documentation is also something that you might focus on. So, you know, being able to document the traditional art, the skills, the beliefs, or the performances, you know, it's, as you know, seeking funding for this work is not easy. And something that's really important in seeking funding is to be able to provide excellent documentation, excellent work samples. So investing in that is something that, you know, might be really useful to you in the long term. So being able to hire a professional photographer or videographer to document your festival or your workshops or something like that could be some examples. Similarly, consulting with other specialists to support you either, you know, with your marketing or your promotion, you know, hiring a social media coordinator. You know, these are all kind of valid ways to use this funding. And we just provide ideas to kind of guide you. But again, the point is for you to think about, well, you know, what does my group need right now? What do I need as an artist right now? And see how we can make it fit within our grant requirements. Public presentations are another big, you know, project area in terms of festivals, you know, performances, concerts, exhibitions, and so on. And this example here, Shirley Muramoto, Japanese koto artist who organized a whole concert performance with other musicians focusing on traditional Japanese music that was specifically played in the incarceration camps during World War II. So we can go to the next slide. So now the sad slides. the unfund slides. What we do not fund, and again, we're following, what are requirements of the funders who are providing the funding as well. So part of that is not being able to fund projects that are part of regular instruction at schools, whether they're K through 12 or universities. So after school programs are fine, other extracurricular kind of projects and work in schools are fine as long as it's not regular instruction and it's not for credit or compensation related to, for instance, a degree program. We're not able to fund out of state travel. And the goal of the grant is also not to support, say, an annual fundraising gala, where the sole purpose of the event is to fundraise. Though you can charge for events that are part of your project for this grant, that's different. Where the work, living cultures, it's in the name. We're supporting everyday cultural practices, not projects that are focused on, interpreting a culture, like, for instance, holding an event once a year that sort of, relives a historical cultural practice or something like that. And then we're not able to support separate applications for the same project. So for instance, 10 different artists all applying separately to perform at a single festival, something like that. The next one, please. We're excited that we, over our history, have been able to support artists and organizations in multiple times over the years. That's part of, the work of sustaining the work over time. But we do ask for, your support and being able to tell us, how did the work go? What did you do? What did you learn? What was the impact in your community? And so that's why we ask for that final report. And if we don't have that, we're not able to fund you again for this coming year. So do send that over for those of you who are in the cycle right now. We also, because last year we actually allowed individual artists to apply for an individual grant and also to separately apply on behalf of their organization. So this year we are not doing that, just because we realized that we have limited funds, and in order for those to go farther, we'll need to only accept an individual artist application or, on behalf of the organization, but not both. So related to our funders, the California Arts Council, the Hewlett Foundation, and the Haas Fund, we're able to support projects that are different from the projects that you're currently receiving support. So if you are a current grantee of these organizations, just apply for a different project. And again, I'm always available to kind of talk about that. For this cycle, we're one of 2 organizations that are distributing funding on behalf of the California Arts Council for their folk and traditional arts program. So the other organization distributing funding is the Center for Cultural Power through their Constellations, Folk Arts and Cultural Stewardship Grants. They have already opened and closed their organizational grants for this program. And they are opening their individual grants for this program next year. So unfortunately, you cannot receive grants from the Living Cultures for this year and from the Center for Cultural Powers Constellations, Folk Arts, and Cultural Stewardship grants for this year as well. I would be one or the other, but we encourage you to apply for both to see, hopefully you get one of those. Happy to answer more questions about that. We wish it wasn't complicated, but this is how it's structured this year. We're going to the next slide, please. Okay, I'm also gonna check on time. Okay, so just a few more things and then we'll open up to all those wonderful questions I'm seeing in the chat. So there are 5 parts to the application. A big part of the application is just kind of understanding like who you are, demographically as well. What is your traditional art form? You know, what languages are spoken? And then, you know, obviously one of the most important parts is the narrative. And I'm going to walk through the different questions tied to the narrative that are directly related to the criteria for this grant. You'll provide a budget to give us a sense of how you want to use the funding. And in that budget, you're able to, if your grant budget is, if your project budget is larger than the grant budget, that's okay to list the whole budget. You would just tell us, you know, this is where ACTA's funding, this is what ACTA's funding would support. It would support, you know, the artists in this project, or would support, you know, whatever it is that you're anticipating. And work samples, there's options for, depending on the type of form that you're submitting, whether it's more performance-based, storytelling, music, you know, we prioritize video for those. And then if it's more material arts based, we prioritize photos. You have the option of providing both kinds of media for both types of art forms. And then lastly, the support letter or video. We're giving an option for you to also provide a video instead of a support letter. And so this can be anyone in your community who understands the value of your work, who has seen and experienced that impact. And, you know, it's not necessarily meant to be an expert per se, though that's welcome. You can decide who can really speak to the value of your work. And that can be through a 2-minute video instead of a letter. Either option is great. Next slide, please. So the criteria, and there's questions, and narrative focuses on all these aspects, and the work samples also focus on this. So the tradition, we want to know, what is the tradition that you are focusing on, and what does that work look like in community? We know that the traditional arts do not happen in an isolated way. So what is that cultural context and impact? Artistry, who are the artists that are featured? You know, what is their background? What is their development? What is their training? What are their accomplishments? Tell us about those artists. Viability and impact. So being able to just tell us, what are you going to do with this funding, and how are you going to plan for it in a way that's going to be supportive, and also, you know, being able to evaluate when you need to make changes. And we're also part of that too. We're available to kind of support you in the process and help you, you know, find resources or deal with other challenges. And then urgency is a really important one. As we've expanded living cultures and been able to do, you know, more outreach and just reach more communities, it's also become, you know, very competitive. Last year was very competitive, and urgency was, you know, a key part of the conversation that the panelists were having in order to be able to determine which applications to recommend for funding. So thinking about, you know, endangered or marginalized art forms, endangered languages, the age of the culture bearers, maybe there's other timeliness related to the social or political context of your community. So there could be different reasons that are really, you know, describing why the art form should be supported today. And give me 1 second. I'm going to make sure that we can see the ASL interpreter on my Spanish recording. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you. Okay, so the decisions are made by a very wonderful panel of cultural specialists, artists, cultural leaders, scholars, folklorists, different people in the field, many of them, you know, very much working alongside and with a lot of the people who apply to receive the grant. So they're always really rich conversations, and we try as much as we can to find people who can speak to and have knowledge of the traditional art forms that people are, bringing forward in their applications. So once they make those difficult decisions and recommendations, our board approves those recommendations, and then that's when we notify who received and who did not receive the grant. Next slide. We encourage as much as possible for people to apply online to Submittable. We tried to make that application accessible and easy to walk through. And so you will have that opportunity to, between now and, or since it opened on June 5th until July 31st at 11:59 p.m. Of course, we always encourage people to submit not at 11:59 p.m. because often there's a concentration of people trying to submit and there's errors happening, and sometimes people aren't able to submit, and it makes it very difficult for us to be able to honor all those applications. So we will not be able to receive your applications after this point. So we encourage you to submit them before that final hour that the application is open. And we'll also do our best to to send reminders and obviously support you in the process as needed. I think we're going to pause here for questions, and then at the end, if we have some time, I'll do a little preview of what the submittable application looks like. So I'm going to ask Aaliyah to read questions that haven't been answered in the chat, to read them out loud, and let me know if there's anything in Spanish that I need to read, please.
Sure. We have a lot of questions, Betty. So I also saw some raised hands. Do you want me to just read directly from here, or go by raised hands as well?
Let's start with the what's in the chat, and then we'll go to raised hands. And if you see stuff that's related or we already addressed, you can combine or skip or however works for you.
All right. We did have a question about income of 500,000, and yes, that is over a total of 3 years. Betty did cover that. There are questions about the organizational budget requirement. Is that flexible? And also, can the fiscal sponsor be out of state? Was another question related to that. Maybe if you want to do those at the same time.
I'm sorry, say the last two again.
Folks are asking if the organizational budget requirement is flexible at all, and if a fiscal sponsor can be located out of California, but the project work would be in California.
I'm not sure what is meant by flexible project budget. I would need some more specific information. Or the organization budget. Basically, as long as you're, is that related to the project budget or the organization budget? Sorry.
Organization.
Okay, so for the organization budget, we're looking at an average in the past 3 years. And the reason we're doing an average is because we understand that organizations' budgets change year by year. So that's why we're not just asking for last year's. So we're asking you to look at the last 3 years and to create an average by adding this last 3 years and then dividing by 3, and that's going to give you your average. As long as that's $500,000 or less, you are eligible, and that's all we need to know. We ask you in your application what your budget is, just for our own data purposes, but in terms of eligibility, we just need to know that the average is below 500,000. The other question was about, can the fiscal sponsor be outside of California? No, they cannot. They have to be a nonprofit that's based in California.
There's another question about the program. If the program has an operating budget under 500,000, but is housed in an organization that has a greater operating budget, can that particular program still apply? This is a question from Nancy Clarence.
Sorry, say it one more time, Olivia.
If the program has an operating budget under 500,000, but it's housed in an organization that has a greater operating budget, can that program still apply?
No, we've made that tribal nations have an opportunity to apply as a cultural program or cultural department, but we that's not eligible for other nonprofits or other community groups that aren't tribal nations.
If a collective of artists applies under a fiscal sponsor, would they apply for the 10,000 since the fiscal sponsor would take an administrative fee? So if a collective of artists applies, are they applying as an organization with a fiscal sponsor or as an individual artist?
I'm not totally understand the question, but if you're applying with a fiscal sponsor, you make an agreement with the fiscal sponsor about the percentage of that they will take from the grant to receive the funds. If you are applying as an individual artist, you do not apply with a fiscal sponsor, you apply directly as an individual artist. Did that answer the question? If not, you can ask a different question.
Would a nonprofit museum supporting an art exhibition and activities of a tribal nation be eligible as a fiscal sponsor?
What was the thing?
Would a small nonprofit museum who is supporting an art exhibition and activities of a tribal nation be eligible as a fiscal sponsor?
As a fiscal sponsor, I'm not sure why. So the fiscal sponsor does not need to be involved in the project itself. The fiscal sponsor serves the role of receiving the funding for tax liability. If the nonprofit is the applicant organization, then they would just need to follow the eligibility for a nonprofit organization, which is basically the budget size, the average income over the last 3 years, and being based in California. So yeah, but the tribal nation, if the tribal nation is applying, the tribal nation either applies directly through their federal status or through a nonprofit fiscal sponsor. So if that's what they're asking, yes, they can serve as a fiscal sponsor, but the part that I was confused about was the museum project. It depends on who's doing the project. The fiscal sponsor does not need to be involved in the project. But if they are, we would just to clarify who's applying. Is it the tribal nation or is it the fiscal sponsor? That's a part that's not clear.
This is from Tony Munoz. Our organization just applied for the CAC grant for 2024-2025, but have not been notified and will not be notified until the fall. Is it okay to apply for Living Cultures in case we don't receive that funding?
I would like to talk to you about what you applied for and what the scope of that project is, and whether there's an opportunity to apply for something different for Living Cultures. But I would need to know a few more details about what it is. And yeah, but I understand that that's a confusing gray area that we've dealt with before when the grant cycles, when you have just applied and have not yet received funding. So that would be my guidance for now, but basically it would be helpful to have some more details and be in conversation.
Next question is, how many awards are anticipated for Living Cultures this cycle?
Around 60 or 70. And we have a total of 675,000 to distribute this year.
Yeah, someone noticed that many folks from the Bay Area have been granted this award. Is this grant for any nonprofit in California? Specifically, can it be from San Diego?
Oh, most definitely. And we have a strong history in the Bay Area also because there was I don't know if it was a couple years or more where we only had funding for the Bay Area. Like our funders only funded the Bay Area, and that's when the grant was only open to the Bay Area. But since last year, we've been back to funding the whole state, and that continues to be the goal. So definitely.
And the budget for Living Cultures application include paying ourselves for time spent organizing an event or practicing our art form?
Yes, they're like artist fees, coordinator fees, are part of, eligible project expenses.
There's a question from Maggie asking, how do we submit our budget specifically? Are there sections of our budget we need to highlight, and how do current work samples have to be submitted?
Yeah, so I can show a little bit on Submittable about that, maybe in a few more minutes. But basically there's a sample budget once you get into the application, and you can see how it's structured. It's structured in 3 ways, with people expenses, supplies expenses, and other expenses. And there's ample space to have different types of expenses. And then you can also upload a budget if for some reason it doesn't fit within that. Work samples, again, you have the option of submitting images or videos depending on the type of art form that you are focusing on. And I can also share more about that when we go into the submittable application.
Some past grantee applications have come through, and they're asking, can they get feedback in order to improve this year's application?
Yes, definitely. We had that option, and you can, if you're looking to apply this year and you didn't get the feedback from last year, you can go ahead and reach out to me. I'm going to put my Calendly link in the chat, though it is getting filled up. So if it is filled up, you can just email that grants@ACTA Online email and give me, 2 or 3 different options to speak, and we can go over that feedback.
Someone's asking about membership-based nonprofit organizations. Do membership-based organizations qualify to apply for the Living Cultures grant?
Yes, we don't have any eligibility questions around whether you are membership-based or not. It's simply the nonprofit status or the fiscal sponsor and the average revenue over the last 3 years.
There's a question about currently having a CAC grant that ends in August. As an org, they would be interested in applying for Living Cultures for a project that is a new project. Can they still qualify?
Yeah, your grant cycle with the CAC is ending before the grant cycle for the Living Cultures. So they're separate things, and that doesn't impact the eligibility.
Great. Let's see. All right, this is a question about the panel. If applying as an individual artist, is the total amount awarded set at 7,000? I believe it's 7,500, but or are panelist judges involved and amount awarded based on a point system giving you less? So what are the amounts and do they change?
We have a single grant amount for individuals and for organizations, so those do not change. You're either recommended for funding for the full grant amount, or you are not recommended for any funding.
Can you provide us with examples on how to evaluate our project's success? I think this would be going back to criteria.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it's about being able to just articulate what your goal is. So my goal with this grant is to host, 5 workshops in my local community to teach traditional Northern Mexican food. And so I'm gonna know I'm successful if if I have, this is up to you to determine, right? So I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna make up my own project. I want to have, a multi-generational group of, I don't know, 5 or 10 people attend each workshop. And so I'm gonna know I'm successful if those people come to at least half of my workshops or all my workshops. Again, you determine what does success look like for you. And then if I'm on my second workshop and I'm struggling, I don't have enough folks, I'm actually gonna then reach out to, these 3 different organizations, because I know that they work with youth, and that's how I'm going to, basically address those challenges. So that's just one kind of example narrative of how you might articulate and talk about successes and challenges. But again, happy to just speak specifically about your own goals and what that would look like.
There's a question about if all music performers identify as LGBTQIA+, could an LGBTQIA+ community concert be an eligible project?
Yes. So that's part of a cultural community that we, that we think about and include. And so it's really about just being able to articulate what makes it what does that community look like in your experience? So what impact do you want to see there? What are the shared cultural aesthetics? What are the traditions that are being kind of passed on and part of that community?
If approved for the grant, what are the reporting requirements?
Basically, it's just the final report. And in the past, we've had folks submit like a kind of midterm update, but this year we don't have that. And for me, it's going to be more about basically you reaching out if you have questions, if you need support. We try to do site visits, so we also contact specific groups and artists directly for that. And so there's different points of kind of check-in and communication, excuse me. But the only formal reporting requirement is the final report.
Alian is interested in how to reach you directly and mentioned grants at actaonline.org. Would you be pointing people there or any other email he's asking?
Yeah, that's the email to reach me at. A lot of you also have my personal email. That's fine. It just helps me be more organized when you email me at the grants email, since I get a lot of other types of emails on my personal email. And this number here is one that you can text me at. I like texts. I think it's an easy and clear way to be in communication. Phone calls, and then again, just setting up an appointment is also best for a longer conversation or engagement. We are running out of time a little bit, so I'm not sure how we're doing on questions, Aaliyah, if there's like many more, or if we're
only one more from Juliet, who's raising her hand, about the average of the grant income for the eligibility requirement of 500,000, in which she is dividing the amount by 3. And if it comes under 400,000, would that include or exclude them for eligibility?
That means you're eligible because you are under 500,000.
Yeah, I don't see any other questions. If you want to open it up, it's up to you.
Okay, great. Awesome. So I'm just going to share my screen to share the submittable application, and then we'll wrap up. So actually, yeah, so if you could stop screen sharing, Aaliyah, I will screen share now. Thank you, Aaliyah. So right now, voy a cambiar a español. Lo que estoy...
So I'm going to switch back to Spanish. What I am showing right now, this is the website, the Living Cultures Grant website, and we have it in Spanish right here. We also have all the information that we just went over. It lives here on the website. All the guidelines, more detail. And here is a button. Excuse me, to apply it. And I will show the same thing on the English website. And then it takes you to the portal with the applications, and then it also gives you the option of applying in English or in Spanish. I'm going to select English, then you have to log in. If you have an account, you can just input your information, and if not, create an account, right? I am going to log in with my existing account. So the application looks like this. And since I already, passed with the eligibility questions, but that will be the first page. That's the first section, a series of questions that have to do with income, with your residency, what we went over for individual and organizational eligibility. And when you prove that you are eligible, then you go to the application. It looks like this. And then you will see, you can add a title to your proposal. Depending which option you select, either individual or organization, then the questions will change. So for individual, you would put your contact information, a lot of demographic information. And this is so we know who is new to our grants. And then demographic, your cultural groups and affiliations, languages, art, type of art form, and then the question. It's going to give you the option of submitting it with 50 words, and then the traditional, or the questions on tradition, the artist, impact, urgency, and then the video option here. And then right here we have the option of selecting either a material art, focusing on rituals, foodways, and then it asks from 5 to 10 images and 2 videos or 1. And then this is asking for 2 videos, and then the option for adding images. Like I mentioned, material arts is more focused in images with the option of videos. And the scenic arts performances are focused on videos with the option of images, which is. And then depending on what you select, you will be able to upload a video or an audio or sending a link. and it's going to give you the option of adding 1 or 2 and the images, and then the budget looks like this. This is an example, like I mentioned, materials or other kinds of expenses, and then it's a table like this. So let's say graphic design, and I'm going to pay them $1,000. And then I will input a return so it adds up. The amounts will add up. And then you return or you do the input, and then that is going to add up the amount. If you don't return or input, it's not going to do that. So do the same. Flyers and printing them out. And then 300, and then it adds up. And then if there's other expenses, you put it there. And then subtotal. And then over here in notes, you say ACTA will finance or support or whatever you decide. So we know if if it's larger, then we're going to focus on that. Over here we have an examples of that. And the option is increasing the budget if it doesn't fit there. But like I mentioned, there is a lot of space, and that's it. And then you can use this button to save the work that you have done. You can also save it automatically, and you can also use this button to save it.
And when you're ready, you can send it, submit it. And if there are sections with this red asterisk, if they're not filled in, it won't allow you to submit. Only once you have all the sections that have that red asterisk filled in, it will allow you to submit. And so if something isn't working, that might be the problem.
Ya se nos acabó el tiempo.
All right, so our time is up, and I just want to show you. You can be in contact with us on our website. You can follow us on our social media channels, CalTrad Arts. And this is our California Traditional Artist Plaza, where you can create a profile to put your services. And you can give options for people who might want to contact you. And Aliyah and I were in San Francisco and Redding this week, and in July, we're going to be in the San Fernando Valley. So if you're close by, you can come in person to our events there. And with that, I think we will close up. I just want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you, Aliyah and Jen, for your support. Thank you to the interpreters. Thank you to our captioner. Thank you so much, and good luck. And we will be in touch.
Gracias. Adiós.
Thank you all very much. Good day.
Thank you.
Thank you,
¿Qué
everyone.
parte del valle, Betty, estarás?
At
Betty, what
San-
part of the valley will you be? In San Fernando.